Now, I want to point out, in the interest of full disclosure, before we go any further, that last year, during the 2020 season, I was okay with the Bears' decision to not extend Allen Robinson's contract, not to give him big-time number one wide receiver, elite wide receiver money. And that was kind of the circumstance and situation of the time. And you're talking about an Allen Robinson that's good, pretty good actually, but as you even saw throughout the 2020 season, some of those plays you would truly expect a legit, absolute, no doubt, number one elite wide receiver to make, he didn't make. That's true. We all know this. There was also the concern or question to me about the Bears quarterback position and situation. Like, why would I invest big money long term when I know I don't have the long-term guy in-house? There's no way Nick Foles was going to be any good. And if you thought Trubisky was going to have some type of bounce-back resurgence season in 2020, I don't know what you were thinking. Like, you were just disconnected from reality, and that's just how it is. So in that scope and thinking about, hey, the Bears could potentially still at least franchise tag him if they were so inclined, like, it made sense to me at that time to not give him a big extension. It didn't make sense. But it is important to note that sometimes situations and circumstances change, which can lead to changes of opinion. And that has led to my change of opinion here, that the Chicago Bears need to get this damn contract extension with Allen Robinson done. I don't know why they're waiting. What the hell are you waiting for? Oh, yuck. We're going to let it play out. Well, Bean Counting Ted thinks it's financially, fiscally prudent to wait to extend our biggest offensive star. No. And I don't know what the hell Pretty Boy Pace is waiting for. You've waited long enough. It's time to get the damn deal done, and there are a variety of reasons for this. Number one is if Allen Robinson goes out there and has a monster year playing on the franchise tag, all you're doing is driving his price up more. Why would you do that? Why would you allow him to get to a situation where either A, you're going to have to pay even more money to keep him than you already would have, especially if you are intending on keeping him. B, why would you get into a situation where, knowing your organization and history, that you're going to be very inclined that if he prices himself too high, you're probably going to be out. So that way you do what? You end up letting your number one offensive weapon, your number one skill player, your number one wide receiver leave for a future third-round compensatory pick? Like, who the hell does that? Especially if you're the Chicago Bears. And let's be honest here. It's not like the Bears have a bunch of young, hungry lions waiting in the wings. Now, Darnell Mooney, I agree with most Bears fans and most Bears media. He is certainly one of those guys that you look at all the peripherals, all of the factors and considerations. He seems like he is poised to have a breakout sophomore campaign in 2021. Like, everything points to that. Everything indicates that that makes sense. But then what do you have after that? An Anthony Miller who's been inconsistent up and down the previous 3 years, who's playing in a contract year himself. Other wide receivers that you don't really know what you've got, or what you've got isn't much. You certainly don't have a real deal Allen Robinson type waiting in the wings to replace Allen Robinson. And then if you want to say, well, you could always get one later on in free agency or the draft, if you're going to get one in free agency, then why in the hell wouldn't you just keep Allen Robinson to begin with? And B, when it comes to the draft and automatically thinking that that's going to be your place to replace an Allen Robinson, there's a couple problems with that. Number one, if you think you're going to spend a first-round pick, you're not, because you don't have one next year. Number two, there's no guarantee that the guy that you would replace would equal or come close to the level of performance of the guy that you know what you can count on from him. You've got some consistency, some track record of performance, and sometimes that's got to matter. And it's not like we're talking about a 32, 33-year-old Allen Robinson. He's all of what, 27, 28 years old. So you're still talking about realistically a guy that's in the prime, the peak of his career, just beginning to truly enter the peak and prime of his career, and who has had some good seasons, putting up some decent numbers, playing with some dumbass, crap-ass quarterbacks like Blake Bortles and Mitchell Trubisky. Like, how much more do you need to see? Why would you run the risk of him becoming too expensive for you to keep? But even more importantly than that, you've made the move to go draft Justin Fields. Justin Fields is your guy now. Justin Fields is your future. Nothing else about this organization matters more than Justin Fields. Because if he develops and becomes that dude, it changes the landscape of the Bears organization. It changes the landscape of the NFC North, the NFC, potentially the NFL. And that's not hyperbole to say that. As a result, it's one thing if you're going to let some defensive guys go because you say, hey, we need to rethink how we allocate our resources, allocate our salary cap space to help our young quarterback. I'm in complete agreement with that. What you don't do is put yourself in a potential situation where you could lose out on the best offensive weapon that you have when you're bringing a young quarterback into the fold. And you can talk about Andy Dalton till the cows freaking come home, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's about Justin Fields and his growth and his development. And we all know damn good and well, unless Matt Nagy is truly trying to be clown show stuff, Fields is going to see the field earlier rather than later in this 2021 season. Why would you want to run the risk of Justin Fields developing this chemistry and this camaraderie, this relationship with a guy like Allen Robinson and then potentially lose him after one season? That makes absolutely no damn sense whatsoever. Now, part of this, I'm sure, is a product of the stupidity of Ryan Pace built this team. He built this team up on defense at a time that the league was going more and more offense. Because who the hell does that? Out-of-touch people like Ryan Pace clearly do. It didn't work. What that means now is you have to pivot and shift your philosophy and your approach as an organization. And maybe Pace is trying to do that. But one of the ways you do that is to take the money you've invested on the defensive side of the ball and slowly reallocate it to the offensive side of the ball, and not so slowly, do it as quickly as damn possible as you can. And why not sit there and try to extend Allen Robinson now, put whatever you can towards this year's salary cap, or just lock it in so that way it's there for the next 3 to 4 years, and you don't have to worry about what that price is going to be after this upcoming season. Just why would you take that risk? Why would you take that chance? Why would you put anything, absolutely anything about your young quarterback's development at chance here? It makes no sense. Every decision that this organization makes in terms of its staff, in terms of its players, its roster, its philosophy, its coaching, its system, its team, you name it, all has to be based around Justin Fields' first, second, third, and to damn infinity. The whole mindset has to change. You can't sit there and do what you did with Trubisky and say, hey, we're going to draft the wrong damn quarterback, trade away several picks we didn't need to fucking trade away to get him, and then basically invest the next 3 first-round picks in the draft from 2018 to 2020 on the defensive side of the ball. That's New York Jets type of clown shit. No, you draft the young quarterback and you build around said young quarterback. You do what the Chiefs did with Mahomes. You don't do what the Bears did with goddamn Trubisky. And not having Allen Robinson already locked up to some type of contract extension is unnecessarily risky. Sure, there's always the risk of, well, what happens if he gets hurt, Jeff, and then you're locked into all this money? Yeah, but what happens if he doesn't and he has the best season of his career, or one of the best seasons of his career, and he potentially hits the open market? What the hell do you think his price is going to be? Like, no risk it, no biscuit. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Sometimes you're going to take a risk, I agree, and you're going to roll craps, and that's just the nature of the beast. But then there are times where it feels like it's an unnecessary risk. Leaving it to chance that Allen Robinson has a monster season, which drives up his contract value, which means you're going to have to pay him even more money long-term to keep him if you wait until after the season to do his contract, feels like an entirely unnecessary risk. And beyond all else, you want to set up Justin Fields as well as you possibly can. There are not 2 wide receivers on this roster better than Allen Robinson. You can definitely say beyond question right now, there's not 1 wide receiver on this roster better than Allen Robinson. If you say Darnell Mooney, man, you are doing projection of the highest order, and that's projection that's not called for or in any way valid at this point in time. You need stars, and you need a couple of stars to help your young quarterback become what you hope and believe and think your young quarterback can be. It just feels like more mediocrity the McCaskey way that Allen Robinson, now that you've made that decision and you went with Justin Fields. It's not like you just went with Dalton and Foles and said, that's our quarterback situation. Maybe we drafted a guy in round 4 or 5 or something. In that case, it might be a different situation. I would agree with that. But that's not it. You have made the call. You believe Justin Fields is your now and your, more importantly, your future. That means everything you do as an organization must be on that fundamental premise of thinking about how do we ensure that future is as good as possible. Potentially losing Allen Robinson does not fit into that category. Re-signing him long-term and getting it done now, so that way you can stretch it out from a cap purpose over the next several years in the way that you see fit, where you have the flexibility to do so, makes all the damn sense in the world. I don't care what it takes at this point, Ryan Pace. Just get this damn deal done already.